There's this very specific feeling you get when a franchise stops being just a franchise and starts turning into something heavier. Not just bigger, not just louder, but heavier in the way it sits in your chest. And that's exactly where I found myself the first time I sat down and watched the trailer for Dune Part III. Not excited in that popcorn opening night way, but kind of quietly bracing for impact. Because if you've been following what Denis Villeneuve has been doing with this universe, you already know he's not interested in giving you easy victories or clean emotional payoffs. He's been building something slow, deliberate, almost meditative, and at the same time, terrifying in its scale. And the trailer, it doesn't explode at you, it doesn't scream, it just unfolds. It opens in silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels like something has already gone wrong. A wide shot of Arrakis, but it's not the golden desert we've gotten used to. The color palette is colder, almost drained, like the planet itself is exhausted. You see the wind dragging sand across the surface in these long, almost ghostly streaks. And right away, something feels different. This isn't the rise of Paul Atreides anymore. This is the consequence of him. Then you hear a voice, and it's unmistakably Timothée Chalamet. But it's not the Paul we met before. There's weight in it, hesitation, regret maybe. He's not delivering some heroic declaration. He's questioning something, or maybe questioning himself. And the way the line is cut in the trailer, you don't even get the full thought. It just hangs there, unfinished, like the film itself is asking you to sit with that uncertainty. What really struck me is how the trailer avoids showing you anything that feels like a traditional plot. There's no clear sense of beginning, middle, or end. Instead, it's fragments, almost like memories or visions, which, if you've been paying attention, lines up perfectly with where this story is headed. You get a quick flash of Zendaya as Chani, but she's not framed as a romantic anchor this time. She looks distant, not physically, but emotionally. There's a shot where she's looking at Paul, and it's not admiration. It's something closer to disappointment, maybe even fear. And that single look tells you more about where their relationship is going than any line of dialogue could. Then there's the sound design. And I have to pause here for a second, because this is where Villeneuve's team consistently separates themselves from almost everyone else working at this scale. The music doesn't swell the way you expect. It kind of pulses underneath everything, like a heartbeat that's slightly off rhythm. It makes every image feel unstable, like it could collapse at any moment. And visually, there's this recurring motif of crowds. Not cheering crowds, not unified crowds, but masses of people moving, almost like a force of nature. There's one shot in particular, and it's barely a second long, where you see thousands of Fremen gathered, and Paul is standing above them. In any other movie, that's the triumphant image, the chosen one, the leader, the Messiah. Here, it feels unsettling, because the camera doesn't celebrate him. It watches him. That's a very intentional choice. It creates this distance, almost like the film is saying, don't get too comfortable with this. And if you know the trajectory of this story, that discomfort is exactly the point. Another thing I couldn't shake is how much the trailer leans into shadows. Faces half lit, rooms barely visible, figures emerging and disappearing. It's not just aesthetic, it feels thematic. Like the film is moving into a space where clarity is gone, morally, politically, personally. There's also a brief glimpse, and it's so quick you could miss it, of what looks like a completely different environment. Not Arrakis, something greener, more controlled, almost artificial. And if that is what I think it is, then the film is about to expand its scope in a way that's less about geography and more about power structures. And that's really what this trailer is whispering the whole time. Power has shifted, and not in a way that's stable. You don't see big action set pieces in the way modern trailers usually throw them at you. There are hints, a sandworm moving beneath the surface, a flash of an explosion, a figure running, but nothing is lingered on. It's like the film is deliberately holding back, not because it doesn't have spectacle, but because it knows spectacle isn't the point anymore. What's fascinating is how this approach trusts the audience. It assumes you're not here just to see what happens next, but to understand what it means that it's happening. And that's a rare thing at this level of filmmaking. Even the pacing of the trailer feels patient. Shots are allowed to breathe. There's space between moments. It's not trying to overwhelm you with information. It's letting you absorb, question, maybe even feel a little lost. By the time it ends, there's no big final line, no explosive crescendo, just a lingering image, Paul again, but this time not as a figure rising, more like someone standing at the center of something he can't control anymore. And then it cuts. No resolution, no reassurance, just that quiet, heavy feeling again. And honestly, that's what stayed with me the most. Not a specific scene, not a particular line, but that sense that this story is about to take a turn that a lot of blockbuster audiences aren't fully prepared for. Because if the first two films were about destiny, this feels like it's about the cost of believing in it. And the strange thing is, the more you sit with that trailer, the less it feels like it's trying to sell you a movie, and the more it feels like it's warning you about one. Because once you start replaying those images in your head, and trust me, you will, patterns begin to surface that don't jump out on a first watch. Little visual echoes, almost like the film is speaking in a language you're not meant to fully understand yet, but you can feel it working on you anyway. There's this one moment I keep coming back to. It's barely there, a fraction of a second, where Paul is standing alone. No crowd, no army, no Chani, no one. Just him, framed against an empty horizon. And the way it's shot, it doesn't look like power. It looks like isolation. The kind of isolation that comes after you've already gotten everything you thought you wanted. That's a very different emotional register from where we started this journey. And what makes it hit harder is how the trailer quietly contrasts that image with earlier flashes of mass devotion. People chanting, bowing, moving in unison. There's almost a rhythm to it, like a ritual that's gotten too big to stop. And Paul isn't leading it anymore. He's being carried by it. There's a subtle but important difference there, and the trailer leans into it without ever spelling it out. You can feel the loss of control creeping in. And then there's Rebecca Ferguson, Lady Jessica, who, if you've been paying attention to this series, has always been playing a much more complex game than anyone around her. The trailer gives her very little screen time, but every shot she's in feels deliberate. There's a calmness to her, but it's not comforting, it's calculated. Like she understands exactly where things are headed and has already made peace with it. Or maybe she helped set it in motion. That ambiguity is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. You also catch glimpses of political spaces. Rooms filled with figures who aren't warriors, but decision makers. The kind of people who don't need to raise a weapon to change the course of entire worlds. And the lighting in those scenes is stark, almost clinical, which creates this contrast with the organic chaos of Arrakis. It suggests that what's happening isn't just a cultural or spiritual shift, it's a systemic one. Power isn't just changing hands, it's changing form. And somewhere in the middle of all this, you get a few brief flashes that hint at something even more unsettling. Visions, or maybe distortions of reality. It's hard to tell. The way the images are cut together, they don't feel linear. They overlap, blur into each other, like time itself isn't behaving the way it should. Which, if you know anything about where Paul's arc is heading, makes perfect sense. But what I appreciate is that the trailer doesn't lean into that in a flashy, sci-fi spectacle kind of way. It treats it almost like a psychological weight, something internal, something that's pulling at him from the inside rather than exploding outward. And that brings me back to Timothée Chalamet, because what he's doing here, even in these fragmented glimpses, feels like a shift from performance to presence. He's not trying to convince you of anything. He's letting you see the cracks, the hesitation in his eyes, the way he holds himself, the subtle tension in his voice. It's not a hero's journey anymore. It's something much more uncomfortable to watch. There's also a noticeable restraint in how the trailer handles its antagonistic forces. You don't get a clear villain moment, no monologue, no imposing introduction. Just shadows, movements, suggestions. And in a weird way, that makes everything feel more dangerous. Because when you can't clearly identify the threat, it starts to feel like it could be everywhere. Or worse, it could be internal. And that idea, that the biggest conflict might not be external at all, is quietly threaded through the entire trailer. It's in the pacing, the framing, the way scenes are allowed to linger just a second longer than you expect. It creates this underlying tension that never fully releases. Even the color grading contributes to that. There's a desaturation happening, but not uniformly. Certain elements still pop: eyes, fabrics, symbols, and it draws your attention in a very controlled way. Like the film is guiding you towards specific details without making it obvious. It's meticulous, almost surgical, and yet, for all that control, there's an emotional looseness to it. Moments that feel unscripted, or at least unpolished, in a way that makes them more real. A glance that lasts too long. A breath that isn't cut out. Small imperfections that make the world feel lived in, rather than constructed. That balance between precision and vulnerability is incredibly hard to achieve, especially in something this large. You also can't ignore the scale, even though the trailer refuses to shove it in your face. It's there in the backgrounds, in the way environments stretch beyond the frame, in the sheer number of bodies moving through space. But it's never the focus, it's context. And that choice keeps the attention where it belongs, on the people navigating that scale, not the scale itself. Which, again, circles back to that central feeling the trailer leaves you with. Not excitement, not even anticipation in the traditional sense, but a kind of quiet dread mixed with curiosity. Like you know you're about to watch something that isn't going to comfort you, isn't going to give you easy answers, and definitely isn't going to let its characters walk away unchanged. And honestly, that's what makes it compelling. Because in an industry that often leans toward familiarity, toward giving audiences exactly what they expect, this feels like a film that's willing to challenge that expectation. Not aggressively, not in a way that alienates, but in a way that asks you to engage a little deeper, to sit with discomfort, to question what you're seeing instead of just consuming it. And if the trailer is any indication, it's not just continuing the story, it's reframing it, which is a risky move. But it's also the kind of move that can turn a trilogy into something that actually lasts beyond its runtime. Something people come back to, argue about, reinterpret over time. And you can feel that intention in every second of what they've shown so far. It's not trying to be the biggest film of the year. It's trying to be the one you can't quite shake after you've seen it. And once you start thinking about it that way, not as the next chapter, but as the moment where everything finally collapses inward, the trailer begins to feel almost inevitable. Like this was always where the road was leading, even when it didn't look like it. Because if you trace the emotional arc from the first film through the second, there's been this slow tightening around Paul. At first, it felt like expansion, new worlds, new identities, new possibilities. But underneath that, there's always been pressure building, expectations stacking, prophecy hardening into something less flexible, less human. And what the trailer for Dune Part 3 does so effectively is show you the moment when that pressure stops being abstract and starts becoming suffocating. There's a shot, again, it's quick, but it lingers in your mind, where Paul is walking through a corridor, and the people around him aren't interacting with him like a person anymore. They're not making eye contact. They're lowering their gaze, stepping aside, almost erasing themselves in his presence. And instead of feeling powerful, it feels alienating, like he's been elevated to a place where he can't actually connect with anyone. That's a very different kind of loneliness than what we usually see in characters like this. And then the trailer subtly layers in something even more complicated. The idea that maybe he sees where this is going and can't stop it. There's a flicker of something in his expression in a couple of those vision-like cuts. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. That's the part that gets under your skin, because it suggests that the tragedy here isn't ignorance, it's awareness. And you feel that ripple outward into the other characters, even in the limited time the trailer gives them. Zendaya's Chani, especially, seems to exist slightly outside the gravitational pull that's forming around Paul. She's still grounded, still connected to something real, something human. And that contrast makes her presence feel almost like a question the film is asking. What does it mean to resist something that everyone else has already accepted? There's tension there that doesn't need dialogue to exist. It's in the way she stands, the way she looks at him, the space between them. You can feel a fracture forming, and it doesn't look like one that's going to heal easily. Meanwhile, the broader world keeps moving, almost indifferent to the personal cost. You see machinery, ships, structures, systems that are already in motion, already adapting to this new reality. And that's where the scale of the story quietly expands beyond individual characters into something much more systemic. Because once belief turns into infrastructure, it's not easy to undo. And the trailer hints at that transition in these almost throwaway moments. A symbol etched into metal, a uniform that didn't exist before, a crowd moving with practiced precision instead of raw energy. These are small details, but they carry weight. They suggest that what started as a movement has solidified into something institutional. And institutions don't bend easily. There's also this underlying sense that time itself is behaving differently for Paul. The way the trailer cuts between moments, not cleanly, not linearly, creates this impression that he's experiencing things out of sequence. Past, present, future. It all starts to blur. And instead of feeling like a superpower, it feels disorienting, like trying to hold on to too many realities at once. And that disorientation bleeds into the audience experience. You're not given a clear timeline. You're not told what happens when. You're just dropped into fragments and asked to piece together a feeling rather than a narrative. It's a bold choice, especially for something at this scale. But it works, because it aligns you emotionally with where the character seems to be. Uncertain, overwhelmed, pulled in multiple directions at once. And then there's the way the trailer handles silence. Not just the absence of sound, but the presence of it, if that makes sense. Moments where everything drops out and you're left with just an image and your own interpretation of it. Those are the moments that linger the longest, because they give you space to project. There's one in particular where Paul is just standing there, and the wind is moving around him, but he's completely still. And for a second, it feels like time has stopped, like the world is waiting for something, or maybe bracing for it. And the trailer doesn't tell you what that something is. It trusts you to feel it. That kind of restraint is rare. Most trailers are terrified of ambiguity. They want to make sure you understand exactly what you're getting. This one seems comfortable letting you sit in uncertainty, and that confidence is telling. It suggests that the film itself isn't going to hold your hand. It's going to expect you to engage, to think, to maybe even feel uncomfortable with what you're watching. And honestly, that's where cinema gets interesting again. Because when a film stops trying to please everyone and starts trying to say something specific, something that might not land the same way for every viewer, that's when it starts to have a life beyond the screen. And everything about this trailer points in that direction. It's not selling a conclusion. It's inviting you into a reckoning. And what really lingers long after the trailer fades out isn't any single image or line. It's the realization that this story was never building toward a victory in the traditional sense. It was building toward a moment where you have to sit with what victory actually costs, and whether it was ever worth chasing in the first place. Because the more you think about what Denis Villeneuve has been setting up across these films, the clearer it becomes that he's been quietly dismantling the idea of the chosen one from the inside. Not by rejecting it outright, but by following it all the way through to its logical conclusion, and then refusing to look away from what that conclusion looks like. And the trailer for Dune Part III feels like the point where that philosophy finally comes into full view. There's a heaviness to everything, not just emotionally, but visually, structurally, even rhythmically. Scenes don't resolve cleanly. Shots don't always give you what you expect. It's like the film is deliberately resisting the idea of closure, at least in the way we've been conditioned to expect it. And that resistance creates this underlying tension that never fully releases. You start to notice how often the trailer frames characters in ways that make them feel small, even when they're technically in positions of power. Paul especially is rarely centered in a way that feels triumphant. He's often off to the side, partially obscured, or surrounded by elements that dwarf him: architecture, crowds, even the landscape itself. It's a visual language that keeps reminding you, whatever power he has, it's not simple, it's not clean, and maybe it's not entirely his. There's also this subtle but persistent suggestion that the world itself is reacting to what's happening. Not in a literal, supernatural sense, at least not overtly, but in the way environments are presented. The desert feels harsher, the spaces feel tighter, even the air in some of those shots looks heavier. It's like the film is treating the setting as something that absorbs and reflects the emotional and political shifts taking place within it. And that's where the trailer starts to feel almost suffocating in a very intentional way. Because you're not just watching events unfold, you're feeling the weight of them. And then there's the idea of inevitability, which is threaded through everything. Not in a way that removes tension, but in a way that transforms it. You're not wondering what will happen as much as you're wondering how it's going to happen, and what it's going to do to the people involved when it does. That's a different kind of engagement. It's less about surprise and more about impact. And the trailer leans into that by giving you just enough to sense the direction without ever fully confirming it. You see glimpses of conflict, of confrontation, of decisions being made, but they're all stripped of context. You're left to fill in the gaps, to imagine the connective tissue between these moments, which, again, pulls you deeper into the experience. Because now you're not just watching a preview, you're participating in it. You're trying to make sense of it, to anticipate it, to emotionally prepare for something you can't quite define yet. And that process stays with you. It's also worth noticing how the trailer handles its emotional peaks, or rather, how it avoids them in the traditional sense. There's no single moment where everything crescendos into a clear, explosive payoff. Instead, there are waves, smaller rises and falls that build on each other, creating a sustained intensity rather than a single spike. That approach requires patience from the audience, but it also creates a more immersive experience. You're not being jolted in and out of the story. You're being drawn into it, slowly, almost imperceptibly. And by the time you realize how deep you are, it's already too late to step back. There's also something to be said about how little the trailer relies on exposition. You're not given explanations. You're not walked through the stakes in a straightforward way. Everything is implied, suggested, hinted at. And that choice respects the intelligence of the audience in a way that feels increasingly rare. It assumes you've been paying attention. It assumes you're willing to connect the dots. And if you are, the reward isn't clarity in the conventional sense. It's a deeper, more layered understanding of what's at play. That's the kind of storytelling that doesn't just entertain. It engages, it challenges, it stays with you. And as I kept thinking about it, replaying those fragments, sitting with that lingering sense of unease, I realized that the trailer isn't just setting up a film, it's setting up a question. Not about what happens next, but about how we, as an audience, respond to it. Because if this story really follows through on what it's been hinting at, if it truly explores the consequences of power, belief, and identity without softening the edges, then it's going to ask something of its viewers that a lot of blockbusters don't. It's going to ask you to sit with complexity, to accept that not every journey ends in a way that feels satisfying, to recognize that sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that leave you unsettled. And judging by everything we've seen so far, Dune Part III isn't interested in being comfortable. It's interested in being honest. If you really sit with what this film is trying to do, the cast isn't just a lineup of big names. It's more like a carefully assembled emotional ecosystem, where every performer carries a different weight of the story, and more importantly, a different interpretation of power. And it all still orbits around Timothée Chalamet, but not in the way you'd expect from a lead in a massive sci-fi trilogy. What's fascinating about his presence here is how much of it feels internalized. He's not projecting dominance outward. He's absorbing everything: pressure, expectation, belief, and letting it compress him from the inside. There's a scene hinted at in the footage, not fully revealed, just fragments, where Paul is addressing a massive gathering. In a typical blockbuster, that's the moment where the actor leans into charisma, into command, into that larger-than-life energy. But here, Chalamet does something much riskier. He plays it like a man who understands that every word he says is going to echo far beyond his control. There's restraint in his delivery, a hesitation that almost feels like he's trying to slow something down that's already moving too fast. And that choice reshapes the entire dynamic of the scene. Instead of feeling inspired, you feel uneasy. You're watching someone become something irreversible. Then you have Zendaya, who, quietly, might be doing some of the most emotionally grounded work in the entire film. Her portrayal of Chani isn't built on spectacle, it's built on presence. She doesn't need big speeches or dramatic gestures. It's in the stillness, the way she holds eye contact a fraction longer than expected, the way her posture shifts when Paul crosses a certain line. There's a moment, again glimpsed rather than fully shown, where she's standing apart from a crowd that's fully immersed in this almost religious fervor. And she's not participating, she's observing. That separation is everything. It tells you that she's still anchored to something real, something human, while the world around her is drifting into something more abstract, more dangerous. And when she finally does step into a confrontation with Paul, it doesn't feel like a dramatic showdown. It feels personal, quiet, painfully honest. The kind of scene where the silence between lines carries more weight than the dialogue itself. Rebecca Ferguson, as Lady Jessica, brings an entirely different energy, one that's almost unsettling in its calmness. She's not reacting to events, she's anticipating them. There's a sense that she's always a step ahead, not because she's controlling everything, but because she understands the systems at play in a way others don't. There's a sequence hinted at involving her within a more controlled, almost ritualistic environment. The lighting is dim, the atmosphere thick, and she moves through it with this quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. It's not dominance in the traditional sense. It's influence, subtle, pervasive, and incredibly difficult to challenge. And what Ferguson does so well is blur the line between maternal concern and calculated intent. You're never entirely sure where one ends and the other begins. That ambiguity makes every scene she's in feel layered, like there's always something happening beneath the surface that you're only partially aware of. Then there's Florence Pugh, whose presence feels like a bridge between worlds. She carries a kind of political intelligence into the film that contrasts sharply with the raw, elemental energy of Arrakis. Her scenes are often set in spaces that feel structured, controlled, environments where power is negotiated rather than seized. And yet, within those spaces, there's tension. You can see it in the way she listens, the way she chooses her words carefully, the way she navigates conversations that are clearly layered with meaning beyond what's being said out loud. She's not just reacting to the rise of Paul, she's analyzing it, adapting to it, trying to find a position within it that doesn't leave her vulnerable. What's interesting is how the film uses her scenes to shift the tone. When you move from the desert to these more formal settings, the pace changes. The energy tightens. It becomes less about survival and more about strategy. And her performance anchors that shift in a way that feels seamless. Austin Butler brings a completely different texture to the screen. There's something unpredictable about his presence. Not in a chaotic way, but in a way that keeps you slightly off balance. His scenes, even in brief glimpses, carry a kind of tension that doesn't rely on volume or aggression. It's quieter than that, more controlled, more deliberate. There's a shot where he's just standing, watching, and the stillness of it is what makes it unsettling. It's not what he's doing, it's what you sense he might do. That kind of performance creates a lingering unease that carries over into every scene he touches. And the film uses that energy sparingly, which makes it even more effective. He's not constantly present, but when he is, the tone shifts. The air feels different. He introduces a kind of instability into the narrative that contrasts with the more measured performances around him. Even the returning ensemble, characters who have been part of this world from the beginning, feel transformed by the direction the story is taking. Their scenes aren't about establishing who they are anymore. That's already been done. Now it's about how they respond to what the world is becoming. And that's where the film's approach to scenes becomes really interesting. Instead of building toward traditional set pieces, it builds toward emotional intersections. Moments where characters collide, not just physically, but ideologically. Conversations that feel like they're carrying the weight of entire systems behind them. Decisions that ripple outward in ways you can feel, even if you don't fully see the consequences yet. There's a noticeable shift in how scenes are constructed. They're less about progression and more about accumulation. Each moment adds a layer, a texture, a piece of context that deepens your understanding rather than pushing the story forward in a straightforward way. And that creates a very different viewing experience. You're not just following a plot, you're absorbing a world. Even the larger, more visually expansive sequences, the ones involving crowds, movement, scale, are framed in a way that keeps the focus on the individuals within them. The camera doesn't get lost in the spectacle. It uses it as a backdrop, a context for the human stories playing out within it. There's a sequence hinted at involving a massive gathering that, in another film, would be shot as a triumphant display. Here, it's almost overwhelming. The sheer number of people, the synchronized movement, the intensity of their belief. It creates a sense of momentum that feels unstoppable. And within that, you see the characters reacting in very different ways. Some are swept up in it, some are trying to control it, and some are quietly resisting it. That interplay is what gives the scenes their depth. It's not just about what's happening, it's about how different people interpret and respond to the same event. And that's where the performances really come alive. Because each actor is bringing a slightly different lens to the story, a different understanding of what's at stake, a different emotional response to the same set of circumstances. And the film doesn't try to unify those perspectives into a single, clean narrative. It lets them exist side by side, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict, and sometimes in ways that don't fully resolve. That lack of resolution is key. It's what makes the scenes feel real, even within a world that's so stylized, so meticulously constructed. Because real human interactions aren't always clean. They're messy, layered, contradictory. And the cast leans into that. They don't simplify their characters to make them more accessible. They embrace the complexity, the ambiguity, the discomfort. And as a viewer, you feel that. You feel the tension in the spaces between characters. You feel the weight of unspoken thoughts. You feel the consequences of decisions before they're even fully realized. And that's what elevates the film beyond just being visually impressive or narratively ambitious. It becomes something more immersive, something that doesn't just show you a story, but invites you to sit inside it, to experience it from multiple angles, to wrestle with it in a way that stays with you long after the scenes have ended. And the more you think about how these performances interact with the environments they're placed in, the clearer it becomes that this film isn't just directing actors, it's directing energy. Every scene feels calibrated, not just in terms of dialogue or blocking, but in how emotional weight moves from one character to another, sometimes without a single word being exchanged. Take the way Timothée Chalamet physically occupies space in this film. In earlier installments, his movements had a kind of searching quality, like he was still figuring out where he belonged. Here, there's a stillness to him that feels almost imposed. He stands rather than moves. He watches rather than reacts. And when he does step forward, it feels deliberate in a way that suggests he's carrying the burden of multiple outcomes in his head at once. There's a moment, or at least a fragment of one, where he's seated in what looks like a formal setting, possibly a council or negotiation space. Everyone else is positioned around him, but there's a noticeable distance. Not physical distance, but emotional separation. The others lean in, gesture, speak. He doesn't. He listens. And that listening isn't passive, it's heavy. You can almost feel the calculations happening behind his eyes. And what's striking is how the scene doesn't rush to fill that silence. It lets it exist. It trusts the audience to understand that what's not being said is just as important as what is. That's a level of confidence you don't see often in films of this scale. Then you shift into a completely different kind of space, something more raw, more elemental, and suddenly, Zendaya's presence becomes the anchor again. There's a scene hinted at where she's moving through a more intimate setting, possibly within a Fremen community, and the energy is entirely different. It's grounded, immediate, human. She interacts with people in a way that feels direct, unfiltered. There's no performance in it, no sense of role-playing or maintaining an image. And that contrast with Paul becomes even more pronounced in these moments. While he's being elevated into something almost symbolic, she remains rooted in reality. And when those two energies collide, when her groundedness meets his abstraction, the scenes take on this emotional charge that doesn't need to be heightened artificially. It's already there, built into the dynamic. There's a particular exchange, again only glimpsed, where they're facing each other, and the space between them feels loaded. Not with anger necessarily, but with understanding. The kind of understanding that makes things harder, not easier. Because once you truly see someone, you can't pretend you don't. And that's the kind of tension the film seems most interested in exploring. Meanwhile, Rebecca Ferguson continues to operate in a space that feels almost separate from everyone else. Her scenes often have a different rhythm, a different tone. There's a ceremonial quality to them, a sense that she's engaging with forces or systems that go beyond the immediate political landscape. You see her in environments that feel enclosed, controlled, almost sacred. The lighting is low, the movements precise. And within that, her performance is incredibly measured. Every gesture feels intentional. Every line carries multiple layers of meaning. What's fascinating is how she manages to convey both control and surrender at the same time. Control in the way she navigates these spaces, the way she interacts with others. Surrender in the sense that she seems to accept, maybe even embrace, the larger forces at play, even when they lead to outcomes that are difficult to reconcile on a personal level. That duality makes her scenes feel almost hypnotic. Then there's Florence Pugh again, whose role in these sequences becomes more pronounced when the film shifts into its political dimension. Her scenes are often structured around conversation, but they never feel static. There's movement within the dialogue, shifts in power that happen mid-sentence, subtle changes in tone that alter the entire direction of an interaction. She listens as much as she speaks, and when she does speak, it's with a precision that suggests she's constantly weighing the implications of every word. There's no wasted energy in her performance. Everything is purposeful. And the environment she's placed in reflect that. Clean lines, controlled lighting, spaces that feel designed rather than organic. It creates a visual and emotional contrast with the chaos of Arrakis that reinforces the idea that power operates differently in different contexts. You're not just watching different characters, you're watching different systems of power intersect. Austin Butler, on the other hand, feels like he exists slightly outside those systems. Not above them, not below them, just adjacent. His scenes carry a kind of unpredictability that disrupts the more structured interactions elsewhere in the film. There's a sequence hinted at where he's moving through a darker, more industrial environment. The lighting is harsher, the texture's rougher, and his presence within that space feels almost like a spark in dry air. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you can feel that something will. And what's interesting is how restrained the performance appears to be. He's not overtly aggressive or theatrical. It's quieter than that, more contained. But that containment creates pressure, and you can sense it building even in the brief glimpses the trailer provides. It's the kind of performance that doesn't need to dominate a scene to control it. Even the background performances, the ensemble of Fremen, political figures, soldiers, are handled with a level of care that adds to the overall immersion. These aren't just extras filling space. They feel like individuals with their own perspectives, their own reactions to what's unfolding. You see it in the way crowds behave. Not as a uniform mass, but as a collection of people responding in slightly different ways. Some are fully committed, almost fervent. Others are more hesitant, more observant. And those subtle variations create a sense of realism that elevates the larger scenes. There's a moment involving a large gathering, where the camera lingers just long enough to catch these individual reactions. A glance exchanged between two people, a hesitation before joining in, a shift in posture that suggests uncertainty. These are small details, but they add depth to the scene in a way that makes it feel lived in rather than staged. And that attention to detail extends to how scenes transition from one to another. The film doesn't rely on sharp cuts or obvious shifts in tone. Instead, it allows moments to bleed into each other. Emotional states carry over. The aftermath of one scene lingers into the next. And that continuity creates a sense that everything is connected, that nothing exists in isolation. It's a more fluid approach to storytelling, one that mirrors the complexity of the world being depicted. You're not being guided from point A to point B in a straight line. You're being immersed in a network of moments, each influencing the others in ways that aren't always immediately clear. And within that network, the cast becomes the primary vehicle for navigating the experience. Their performances are the anchors. Their choices shape how you interpret what you're seeing. Their interactions create the emotional through line that holds everything together. And what's remarkable is how cohesive it all feels, despite the diversity of styles and approaches. Each actor brings something distinct, but it all fits within the same tonal framework. There's a shared understanding of what this film is trying to do, and that understanding translates into performances that feel aligned, even when they're in conflict with each other on screen. That alignment is what allows the scenes to resonate. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about what happens in those scenes. It's about how those moments make you feel, how they linger, how they reshape your understanding of the characters and the world they inhabit. And in that sense, the cast isn't just performing the story, they're embodying it. And when you step back and look at how all of these performances are woven into the fabric of the film, what really starts to stand out is how much trust there is. Not just between the actors and the director, but between the film and the audience. There's no over-explaining, no emotional shortcuts, no moments where the film feels like it's trying to guide you toward a specific reaction. It simply presents these people, in these spaces, dealing with consequences that feel increasingly out of their control, and lets you sit with it. There's a sequence, or more accurately, a collection of images that suggest a sequence, where everything seems to slow down. Not in a stylized, cinematic, slow-motion way, but in a psychological sense. Movements feel heavier, time feels stretched, and at the center of it, you have Timothée Chalamet again. But this time not as a leader, not as a symbol, just as a person who looks like he's trying to process too much at once. He's surrounded by activity, people moving, voices rising, systems operating, but there's a disconnect. Like he's slightly out of sync with the world around him. And that dissonance is incredibly effective because it visually represents something that's difficult to articulate. The idea of being present in a moment, but not fully able to engage with it. It's not dramatized, it's observed. And that observational quality runs through a lot of the film's most impactful scenes. Then you have moments where the film pulls back, widens its lens, and lets the scale take over. But even then, it never fully detaches from the human element. There's a scene hinted at involving a large movement across the desert, possibly a coordinated operation or migration. The sheer size of it is undeniable, but the camera doesn't stay at a distance. It moves in and out, finding individuals within the larger whole. You see someone adjusting their clothing against the wind, someone else looking back just for a second before continuing forward. These tiny human details are what ground the spectacle, what keep it from becoming abstract. And that balance between the massive and the intimate is where the film seems to find its rhythm. Zendaya continues to be central to that intimacy. There's a scene that feels like it takes place in a quieter, more enclosed environment, possibly a private space, away from the larger political and social pressures. And in that space, her performance shifts slightly. It becomes softer, more vulnerable, but not in a way that feels weak. It feels honest. She's not trying to navigate a system in that moment. She's just responding to another person. And that simplicity, in contrast to everything else happening around it, makes the scene stand out. It's a reminder of what's at stake on a personal level, beyond the larger narrative. And when that personal level intersects with the broader world again, the impact is amplified. Because now you're not just watching events unfold, you're feeling what they cost. Rebecca Ferguson's scenes, on the other hand, often carry a kind of quiet intensity that builds over time. There's a moment suggested where she's part of a ritual or ceremony, something that feels deeply rooted in tradition and belief. The environment is controlled, almost suffocating in its precision. And within that, her performance is incredibly restrained. She doesn't dominate the scene, she inhabits it. And that distinction is important because it allows the atmosphere to do part of the work. The tension isn't just coming from what she does, it's coming from how she exists within that space, how she aligns herself with the forces at play, how she subtly influences the direction of events without ever making it overt. It's a performance that rewards attention. The more you watch, the more you notice. Florence Pugh, meanwhile, continues to operate in a space where language is a tool, and silence is just as powerful as speech. There's a scene that feels like a negotiation, not necessarily in the formal sense, but in the way two people are trying to understand each other's positions without fully revealing their own. The camera stays close, focused on faces, on micro-expressions, on the slight shifts in tone that signal changes in power. And what's remarkable is how much is communicated without being explicitly stated. You can sense the stakes, you can feel the tension, and yet, on the surface, it's just a conversation. That layering is what gives the scene its depth. Austin Butler's presence continues to inject a different kind of energy into the film, one that feels less structured, less predictable. There's a sequence hinted at where his character is moving through a space that feels almost hostile, not just physically, but atmospherically. The lighting is uneven, the environment rough, and his movement through it feels deliberate, almost predatory. But again, it's not exaggerated, it's controlled. And that control makes it more unsettling, because you get the sense that he's fully aware of the impact he has on the space around him. And he uses that awareness strategically. It's not chaos, it's calculated disruption. And that kind of presence creates a ripple effect in the scenes he's part of. Other characters react differently. The tone shifts. The energy becomes less stable, more volatile. Even when he's not the focus, you can feel his influence. And then there are the quieter, transitional moments, the ones that don't necessarily stand out on their own, but contribute to the overall texture of the film. A character walking through a corridor, the sound of footsteps echoing slightly longer than expected, a door closing with a soft but final click, a glance exchanged between two people that suggests a shared understanding. These are the moments that fill in the gaps. They give the film its sense of continuity. They make the world feel cohesive. And they allow the larger, more dramatic scenes to land with greater impact. Because without those quieter beats, everything would feel heightened all the time, and that would diminish the effect. Instead, the film creates a rhythm, a flow between intensity and stillness, between action and reflection. And the cast moves within that rhythm with a kind of intuitive understanding. They know when to hold back. They know when to push forward. They know when to let a moment breathe. And that awareness is what elevates the entire experience. Because at this level, it's not just about delivering lines or hitting marks. It's about creating something that feels alive, something that evolves in real time, something that continues to resonate even after the scene has ended. And as all of these elements come together, the performances, the environments, the pacing, the subtle details, you start to see the film not as a series of isolated moments, but as a continuous, interconnected experience. One where every scene, no matter how small, contributes to a larger emotional and thematic landscape. And within that landscape, the cast isn't just telling a story, they're living inside it, shaping it, responding to it, and in many ways, being shaped by it in return. Talking about the story of Dune Part III feels a little different than breaking down a normal blockbuster, because this isn't a movie that's built around a clean chain of events. It moves more like a tide, slow, heavy, and impossible to stop once it's in motion. So instead of thinking of it as, this happens, then this happens, It makes more sense to think of it as a world reaching a point where everything that's been building finally starts to press inward at once. By the time this film opens, Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, isn't becoming the figure people believe him to be anymore. He already is that figure. The shift has happened. The problem is, he's the only one who seems to understand what that actually means. The Fremen don't see a man, they see fulfillment, a prophecy realized. And the film doesn't rush past that, it lingers in it. You spend time watching how belief reshapes behavior, how people talk differently around him, move differently, even think differently. There's a kind of quiet transformation happening in the background of almost every scene, and it makes the world feel like it's reorganizing itself around this single idea. Paul, meanwhile, is caught in a position that's hard to even describe in simple terms. He has influence, but not freedom. He has power, but not control. The film leans heavily into that contradiction. There are moments where he's making decisions that affect entire populations, entire planets even. But the way it's framed, it doesn't feel like authority. It feels like inevitability. And that's where the emotional core of the story really starts to take shape. Because Paul isn't trying to conquer anything anymore. He's trying to understand whether the path he's on can still be altered, or if it's already locked in place. There's a sequence early on where he's confronted with the consequences of actions that, in a more traditional story, would have been framed as victories. Expansion of influence, consolidation of power, unification of people under a shared cause. All of it sounds like success on paper, but the way it's shown here, it doesn't feel like success. It feels like escalation. And that's an important distinction, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. At the same time, Chani, played by Zendaya, becomes the emotional counterweight to all of this. She's still connected to the original purpose, the original struggle of the Fremen, and that puts her in a complicated position. She's close enough to Paul to see what he's becoming, but grounded enough to question it. Their relationship doesn't explode into dramatic conflict right away. It shifts gradually. Conversations become more careful. Silences last longer. There's a growing sense that they're no longer standing on the same ground, even when they're physically in the same space. And the film is patient with that evolution. It doesn't force a breaking point. It lets the distance grow naturally, which makes it feel more real and more painful. Meanwhile, Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is operating on a completely different level. She understands the machinery behind what's happening, the religious, political, and psychological forces that are converging. And instead of resisting it, she seems to be guiding it, but not in an obvious way. Her influence is subtle, almost invisible at times. She nudges rather than pushes. She plants ideas rather than declaring them. And because of that, it's hard to pin down exactly what her intentions are. Is she protecting her son? Is she serving a larger agenda? Is she doing both at the same time? The film never gives you a simple answer, and that ambiguity makes her one of the most compelling elements in the story. On the political side, the world beyond Arrakis begins to react more aggressively. Power structures that were previously distant or indifferent now recognize that something fundamental is shifting. And that brings in characters like the one played by Florence Pugh, who represents a more calculated, strategic response to Paul's rise. Her scenes are less about emotion and more about positioning. Alliances, negotiations, quiet maneuvering behind the scenes. It's a different kind of tension, less immediate, but just as impactful. You start to see how the ripple effects of what's happening on Arrakis are spreading outward, influencing decisions in places that feel far removed from the desert. And then there's the opposing force, embodied in part by Austin Butler, whose presence adds a layer of unpredictability to the story. He doesn't represent a simple, straightforward antagonist. He's more like a destabilizing element, someone who operates by a different set of rules, or maybe no rules at all. His interactions with the world feel sharper, more volatile. Where Paul's story is about inevitability, this character brings in the possibility of disruption. And the tension between those two forces, inevitability and disruption, becomes one of the driving undercurrents of the film. As the story progresses, everything starts to tighten. Personal relationships, political alliances, internal conflicts, they all begin to intersect in ways that feel increasingly unavoidable. And the film doesn't rush to resolve those intersections. It lets them build, layer by layer, until the weight of them becomes almost overwhelming. There's a point where it becomes clear that no outcome is going to feel clean. No decision is going to come without cost. And the film leans into that reality instead of trying to soften it. Visually, the story mirrors this progression. The environments feel more constrained, more intense. Even the open desert starts to feel less like freedom and more like a stage where something irreversible is unfolding. Crowds become more organized, more unified, but also more impersonal. Individual identity starts to blur into collective purpose. And within that, Paul's internal struggle becomes more pronounced. He's not just dealing with external pressures, he's dealing with the knowledge of what those pressures are going to lead to. The film suggests that he can see multiple paths forward, multiple possible futures, but that doesn't give him clarity, it gives him responsibility. And responsibility in this context feels like a burden rather than a privilege. By the time the story reaches its later stages, the sense of inevitability has fully taken hold. Events don't feel like they're happening because of a single decision. They feel like the result of everything that's come before, converging in a way that can't be undone. And the film doesn't try to provide a neat resolution to that. Instead, it focuses on the impact, on how these events reshape the characters, on what's lost in the process, on what remains. And that brings us into the review side of things. Because how you respond to this film is going to depend a lot on what you're expecting from it. If you're looking for a traditional blockbuster experience, clear heroes, clear villains, decisive victories, this isn't going to give you that. And it's not trying to. It's deliberately moving away from that structure, even though it has all the elements that could support it. What it offers instead is something more reflective, more challenging. It asks you to engage with the story on a deeper level, to think about the implications of what's happening rather than just the events themselves. And that approach isn't going to work for everyone, but for those willing to meet it where it is, it creates a much richer experience. The performances are a huge part of why that works. Timothée Chalamet carries the film with a kind of quiet intensity that feels appropriate for the direction the story takes. He doesn't overplay the transformation. He lets it emerge gradually, which makes it feel more believable. Zendaya provides the emotional grounding that keeps the film from becoming too abstract. Her presence reminds you of what's at stake on a human level, even as the story expands into larger, more complex territory. Rebecca Ferguson adds depth and ambiguity, creating a character who feels both central and elusive at the same time. Florence Pugh brings a sharp, controlled energy that enhances the political dimension of the story. And Austin Butler introduces a tension that keeps the narrative from becoming too predictable. Visually and structurally, the film stays consistent with the tone established in the previous entries, but it pushes further into complexity. It trusts the audience more. It explains less. It leaves more open to interpretation. And that's both its strength and its risk. Because it means the film isn't just something you watch, it's something you have to engage with, something you have to think about, maybe even wrestle with a little. And that's not the easiest kind of experience, but it's often the most memorable one. By the time it ends, you're not walking away with a simple sense of closure. You're walking away with questions, with images that stick in your mind, with a feeling that what you've seen is going to take some time to fully process. And honestly, that feels exactly in line with what this story was always meant to be. From the very beginning, the way Dune Part III structures its narrative emphasizes the weight of consequences. Unlike a typical action-oriented sequel, where you can follow a straightforward line of cause and effect, this film is more about the cumulative impact of choices, belief systems, and the collision of personal and political ambitions. Paul Atreides, once a figure slowly discovering his destiny, now faces the full complexity of it. He doesn't just wield power, he is the axis around which entire societies begin to pivot. And that responsibility manifests in layers that extend far beyond a single scene or conversation. The interplay between Paul and Chani, portrayed with such subtlety by Zendaya, becomes the emotional spine of the story. Their relationship is no longer merely a romantic subplot. It is a lens through which the audience perceives the moral and spiritual cost of Paul's evolution. Scenes of intimacy are juxtaposed with tension-filled political strategy sessions, highlighting the ever-present friction between personal desires and broader obligations. This duality enhances the film's texture, making it feel lived in rather than orchestrated for spectacle alone. Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, continues to embody the tension between guidance and autonomy. Her interventions often arrive in the smallest gestures: a deliberate glance, a carefully chosen word, a pause in conversation. She operates almost like a gravitational force within the narrative, influencing outcomes subtly but decisively. Her character underscores one of the film's core explorations. Power does not always announce itself. It often moves through quiet, unobserved channels that shape events as effectively as any public decree. Florence Pugh's character introduces a dimension of political cunning and pragmatic foresight. Where Paul represents a philosophical and moral struggle against destiny, her character embodies strategy and calculation. Her scenes are often dense with implication, featuring layered conversations where subtext outweighs dialogue. You see alliances formed and broken not through grand gestures, but through measured observation, a raised eyebrow, or a subtle shift in tone. These sequences reinforce the theme that leadership is as much about negotiation and perception as it is about strength or charisma. Austin Butler's character injects a different kind of tension, one that is less predictable and more disruptive. His scenes carry a latent volatility, creating narrative friction without the need for overt confrontation. The sense of unpredictability he brings contrasts with the methodical, almost inevitable trajectory of Paul's rise. This tension is crucial because it prevents the story from becoming linear or deterministic, reminding the audience that even in a world of prophecy and destiny, individual agency can alter outcomes in subtle but significant ways. The film's action sequences also depart from conventional, spectacle-driven blockbuster expectations. While there are grand set pieces, battles that span the desert, and visually stunning confrontations, the focus remains on character experience within those moments. Close-ups, selective camera movements, and deliberate pacing ensure that the emotional and psychological stakes of conflict are never overshadowed by sheer scale. A sandworm encounter, for example, is less about CGI spectacle and more about Paul's strategic decision-making under extreme pressure. You feel the tension in every breath, in the weight of every choice, rather than merely watching a creature appear on screen. The desert itself is almost a character in this film. It shapes behavior, dictates tactics, and reflects the internal states of those who traverse it. Scenes in the open sand are intercut with interior sequences, creating contrasts that emphasize isolation, vulnerability, and the constant presence of environmental forces that exceed human control. The cinematography, lighting, and sound design work in tandem to make the setting both awe-inspiring and ominous. You are acutely aware that the environment is not neutral. It responds to, challenges, and amplifies the drama among the characters. An underlying theme of the film is the concept of inevitability versus choice. Paul's visions, glimpses of potential futures, are a recurring element, but rather than providing clarity, they often heighten tension. They illustrate the burden of foresight, knowing that certain paths are likely, but not fully comprehending their consequences. This creates a narrative rhythm where action and reflection are interwoven. The audience is invited to consider not just what is happening, but why, and how each decision reverberates across social, political, and ecological dimensions. Relationships within the ensemble cast are intricately interlaced with these thematic concerns. Chani and Paul's shared understanding exists in parallel with political calculations from figures like Pugh's character and the broader Fremen leadership. Interpersonal loyalty, ideological conviction, and personal ambition intersect and occasionally collide, generating nuanced conflict that does not require explicit exposition. These dynamics give the story depth, allowing it to feel organic even as it unfolds on a grand, almost mythic scale. The film's sound design deserves attention for how it enhances narrative immersion. Moments of quiet are deliberate and loaded with significance, giving weight to otherwise subtle performances. The absence of musical scoring in critical sequences allows tension to emerge naturally from character interaction and environmental cues. Conversely, sweeping orchestral passages underscore climactic developments, but are deployed sparingly, reinforcing the contrast between human emotion and external spectacle. This approach ensures that the audience's attention is anchored to the character's internal states rather than distracted by musical cues. Dialogue in the film is purposefully measured. Characters do not speak to fill silence or explain exposition. Every line carries intention. This disciplined approach means that viewers must actively engage with subtleties, a glance, a hesitation, a rhetorical inflection, to fully grasp narrative undercurrents. It's a storytelling technique that rewards attentiveness, and it reflects the philosophical depth of the source material, where knowledge, belief, and perception drive the story as much as physical events do. One of the most striking aspects of the narrative is its treatment of prophecy. Previous entries position Paul as the Kwisatz Haderach figure, but Part 3 interrogates what that designation truly entails. Rather than glorifying the fulfillment of prophecy, the film examines its costs: moral compromise, erosion of agency, and the unintentional consequences of imposing one's vision onto a complex world. This tension elevates the story beyond standard hero's journey tropes and creates sustained dramatic interest. Political intrigue expands in scale and complexity. Various factions, Bene Gesserit, Fremen, Imperial powers, maneuver simultaneously, and the narrative captures the collision of these forces with clarity, even as it retains ambiguity. There's no single villain or adversary. Instead, opposition emerges organically from conflicting ideologies, necessity, and survival instincts. This makes confrontations more compelling, because stakes are never abstract or arbitrary. They are the logical outcome of competing motivations that are both understandable and sometimes morally ambiguous. The climax of the film, hinted at through trailers and early screenings, prioritizes moral and existential reckoning over traditional spectacle. Paul faces choices that could secure his power, but at devastating cost. Rather than celebrating triumph, the narrative emphasizes reflection, consequence, and ambiguity. This choice underscores the film's commitment to character-driven storytelling, ensuring that emotional and philosophical stakes remain at the forefront, even amid large-scale sequences. Visually, the film maintains the striking palette and expansive framing that characterize previous installments. Desert vistas are juxtaposed with intimate interiors, creating a rhythm of scale that reinforces thematic contrasts. Isolation versus community, instinct versus strategy, destiny versus agency. CGI and practical effects are seamlessly integrated, serving story rather than spectacle, which enhances immersion and credibility. From a critical perspective, the film succeeds in balancing narrative complexity with emotional resonance. Character arcs are carefully developed, thematic concerns are consistently explored, and pacing is meticulously managed. While the story's density may challenge viewers expecting traditional linear storytelling, the payoff is a richer, more layered cinematic experience. Attention to subtle visual cues, dialogue inflection, and spatial dynamics ensures that repeated viewings reveal additional insights and connections. The ensemble cast delivers uniformly strong performances. Chalamet's portrayal is contemplative, absorbing the enormity of Paul's role with nuanced restraint. Zendaya provides a grounding human presence. Ferguson adds strategic and moral complexity. Pugh brings political acumen, and Butler introduces tension and unpredictability. Each actor inhabits their character fully, creating interwoven dynamics that feel authentic, even amidst a highly stylized narrative environment. In terms of thematic content, the film examines leadership, power, responsibility, and foresight. It emphasizes that influence is not inherently virtuous or corrupt. It is defined by choices and consequences. The narrative interrogates the nature of belief, both collective and individual, and explores how systems of faith and ideology shape human behavior. These themes are consistently reinforced across plot lines, visual design, and character interaction, resulting in a coherent philosophical through line. The film's narrative construction, interweaving intimate human moments with expansive environmental and political dynamics, exemplifies a sophisticated approach to storytelling. Scenes are designed to serve multiple functions, advancing character development, reinforcing thematic resonance, and building visual and emotional tension simultaneously. This multi-layered construction ensures that the audience remains engaged intellectually and emotionally, while also providing sensory satisfaction through cinematography, production design, and soundscape. Ultimately, Dune Part III is less about external spectacle than internal consequence. Battles, desert treks, and political maneuvers are important, but their significance derives from how they shape, challenge, and reflect the human characters within the story. The result is a film that functions simultaneously as epic sci-fi and nuanced character study, creating a lasting impact that resonates beyond conventional genre boundaries. In summary, the plot and review of Dune Part III reveal a work of exceptional ambition. It prioritizes consequence over spectacle, internal conflict over external triumph, and moral complexity over narrative simplicity. The cast delivers deeply committed performances that elevate the story, and the careful construction of scenes, pacing, and thematic resonance ensures that the film rewards careful attention. Its approach to prophecy, power, and leadership challenges conventional storytelling, providing a rich, layered experience that invites reflection and sustained engagement. For audiences willing to immerse themselves fully, it offers one of the most sophisticated and emotionally compelling entries in contemporary sci-fi cinema, blending philosophical inquiry, character exploration, and environmental grandeur into a cohesive and impactful cinematic statement.